Hello, all you people out there in internet land. My name is Britt Kulick. I use they, she pronouns. I'm a professional stage manager, and today I'm going to talk about what it was like to stage manage through the pandemic. I'm going to talk about what it was like to stage manage in college and then professionally during this pandemic. So it's a two-part video. This is going to be part one, and let's jump right into it. Real quick, my university, I realized very recently, I always knew I was very fortunate to be able to go back and be in person. I guess I did not realize how fortunate I was because I have met a lot of people who graduated in 2021 like I have who never went back to school. They left their junior year from the pandemic and everything was virtual. I met a couple of people recently who had their whole sophomore year pretty much virtual, their whole junior year pretty much virtual. So the fact that I got to go into school every day, I got to be in classes in person, I got to interact with people in person, I am forever grateful for. I preface all this by saying as well, we were required to be masked. That did not matter. I was masked in class, I was masked in public spaces like our cafes, I was masked doing scene shop work, which is a story for another time. I was masked in rehearsal, and I remained masked in rehearsals. We had a rule that you could be unmasked during tech, and we were obviously unmasked for the show. We were masking in the wings. My ASM had to be in charge of sort of enforcing that. My school also decided to do shortened semesters. My fall semester, I think, was 13 weeks instead of 16. We went from the middle of August to Thanksgiving, and then from Thanksgiving through the first of the year I was home. Around the 5th or the 6th, somewhere around that, I came back, and the spring semester was shortened. I don't believe we had a spring break. I think we had random Fridays off throughout the year to supplement for a lack of spring break, but I don't think we had a formal spring break, and I graduated. There were two graduations, the 7th and the 8th of May, as opposed to the 14th or 15th, somewhere in the middle of May. So, all of this in mind, the show went on. We usually did 2 shows in the fall, sometimes 1 to 2 in the spring, it was depending. So the fall semester was 2 shows. We did John Proctor is the Villain. It's still a relatively new play, but it's going to Broadway right now. We got it, it was 3 years old at the time, I think, that we got it. And my buddy Juliana, her senior culminating experience, her SCE, her big senior project was to direct, and she directed Hamlet over Zoom. We affectionately called it Zamlet. My sister was Ophelia. It was a really cool production, and it was our first time being introduced to a Zoom production. So it was interesting. That was later in the semester. I had the early show, we did John Proctor's The Villain, we did it in person. I was not involved in picking the script. I don't remember who was. I knew that students always gave input, but I think a big reason why John Proctor was picked is it is one set. It is set basically just in a school. You don't have to do many scene changes. They go to a gas station one time. It's basically one set, and the actors can basically wear their own clothes. It's modern dress, so that means it's very easy to acquire, and that means it's very easy to clean. Cleanliness is going to be a very big theme going forward. We were rehearsing 5 or 6 days a week, I can't quite remember. So here's what sort of a standard rehearsal looked like. I would go into our black box theater, turn on the air purifier. I would set up 2 tables for my director and my ASM and myself, and chairs, and then I would set up chairs and or the desks, because John Proctor takes place in the school. A lot of desks involved. I would set up the desks. I disinfected the chairs and all the tables, desks, all of that stuff we had this big industrial container of Clorox wipes. I had a big thing. It was a big cardboard box with a bladder of Purell inside of it. You could find 2 or 3 of those in every room on campus. And I opened all the doors as well. All the doors to the black box, I basically opened to try to get airflow in. Then I'd go right across the hall to the big auditorium that we were going to be performing in, do the same setup, start the air purifier, put all the tables, chairs, desks, anything that we needed, wipe all of that down, and then leave that room. The rule was you could spend 30 minutes in a room before you had to leave so that the air could circulate. I think they circulated on like 30-minute cycles. So we would do 30 minutes in the black box, then go do 30 minutes in Brush, the performance auditorium, and then back to the black box, etc., etc. Nobody was really to be in those spaces until it was time, which was super weird to have to like go out into a hallway to get the actors and bring them in. But that was just so like at 7 o'clock when rehearsal started, that is when the 30 minutes could start, instead of say the first person gets there at 6:30, then by 7 o'clock we already have to move. So it was a way to try to limit how much we had to move back and forth. We were all masked, which was very interesting. This was sort of my first foray into intimacy choreography, and a wonderful intimacy choreographer come in. I learned about placeholders, actors who needed to kiss or hug. It was usually like a touching of hands as the placeholder until we got to tech. What ended up being somewhat beneficial was we were building this set in space. So when we got the walls up and everything and we started being in there as much as we could until tech. When we got to tech, there was no more flip-flopping buildings. We were in Brush. It was during that time that things got to be, it's not just disinfecting tables and chairs, it's doorknobs and it's props. Any prop that we had that we could disinfect, we did. I remember, I hope I have a photo of it. If I do, we'll put it up. Behind one of the walls, we taped out on the floor everybody's space. And they had everybody's name. So instead of having one prop table, everyone just had their own square on the floor, out of the way. And that's where their stuff went. And their stuff was never to mingle because it was hard. What was sort of crazy was we had to do laundry every night. If you're not familiar with theater, you don't do laundry every night. Sometimes yes, but usually you try to get a couple of wears out. I ended up having to take home somebody's laundry because they were an RA and people had been messing with the washer and dryers, like very badly. Like people were getting their clothes bleached. It was a mess. So I ended up, because I lived in a townhouse that had my own private unit, I would go and do that person's laundry. Most people had to take their laundry home to do, just because we only had one washer and dryer and it just wasn't capable of handling all of that. Shows were interesting because I had to remain masked while I was in the booth on comm. That was my first experience doing calling a show with the mask. And I hadn't called a show in a year at that point. The last show that I had called was fall of my junior year, which was a play called Miss Witherspoon. It was just a straight play. That was the last show I called because we didn't do a spring musical. My spring musical never happened because COVID shut it down. So I was calling in a mask. It was what it was. In the spring, we did a musical called Songs for a New World. It's a really great piece. It's got a lot of great songs in it. But again, there was choreography. It wasn't huge numbers. It wasn't like an Anything Goes. It wasn't like a Chicago. There was no intimacy. There was no fighting. There was nothing to really, get in people's faces about, which was really good. Simple sets. It was a very large ensemble. The sets moved. There were certain pieces that moved, and we had projections, but there were no major set changes. So again, not a lot of people backstage. That provided its own set of challenges because we would be doing music rehearsals in particular. We would start out in one room, and we may have only had that room for like an hour blocked out of time, but we'd have to, at that half hour, move to the black box and then have to go from the black box to Brush and then back to the black box because all of the other rooms were taken by, other people, other events that had scheduled time. So music rehearsals, I remember sometimes we would be in 3 different rooms for one rehearsal and rotating between them. It was sort of crazy. Choreography again was crazy. Everyone's masked and doing choreography and trying to sing. There wasn't a ton of blocking in the show. There's not a ton of props, I think, in the show either. So there was less for me to wipe down. I do remember we had like a big staircase, so I was, every time we had it, like going up and down with like Clorox wipes to do that. That show as well, you know, we had air purifiers going. During both of the shows that I did, people were sick, people had allergies. It was not what the big thing, thank God, but it was difficult, and we'd have to play rehearsals by ear sometimes. I remember waking up some days and I had like a little thermometer I bought from the dollar store, and I'm checking my temperature like daily. It was sort of crazy, because I, as the stage manager, my job is to protect the actors and to keep everyone safe and to keep things running and on time and all of that. And I did not want to be sort of the person to bring a whole production down. I think it changed a lot in me personally, and it still affects. I talk to my friends about it sometimes. I'm like, do you remember like this in college, and like, did it affect you? And it's like, yeah, it did. And you're valid in these feelings. Both of my shows did go off. John Proctor as the villain had a successful run. Songs for a New World had a very successful run. We only did 4 shows. We were only doing 4 shows pre-COVID. We were only doing 4 shows during COVID. I feel very fortunate for those experiences, especially considering what I will talk about in the next video about what I had to do in the professional world. So until next week, drink water, give grace, and I will see you in the next video.